Oh shit. Critical analysis? I'm not gonna lie, I came in here completely ready to just do vibes and feelings.
I did say attempted. So this has been almost a fucking year in the making. I started planning this like last November or some shit, and I was intending.
I see the problem.
Yeah.
I see the problem.
You see it. You see it. I was intending to do this way back closer to when we finished all of these, but we actually ended up continuing some of them, and then just, time didn't work out quite that way. So we're doing it now. Which means NikNak has had to perhaps refresh himself on a few of these series. But I've made a lovely PowerPoint that will help us get through all of what I want to cover today. So
I got out of this 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
So Transmigration novels. Specifically Transmigration, not Isekai, although there is some crossover. We're going to be discussing that in a second. So these are all the books that we read. Some of these we just read the book cover that you're seeing. Some of these we've read far further into the series. Naming, not naming names, but, there's 3 in that top row that we've gone much further into.
I'm seeing double.
You are seeing double. So we did Accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter as both the manga and as the light novel, and I've decided that for the purposes of those technically being 2 different mediums, and we kind of did cover different things in them, we're going to talk about both of them, because that feels fair. All right, so Transmigration. We've had actually debates about this on the podcast, so Transmigration, the word, is the movement of a soul into another body after death, related to reincarnation. So if you might believe that perhaps your grandmother has been reincarnated as your cat, then you believe in transmigration, right? So it's the idea of one person's soul taking over another person's body, or being reborn into the body of someone else. Or something else. So that's actually from vocabulary.com. It's a dictionary site. But I've also pulled some interesting stuff from tvtropes.com, hence why they're bolded. I've highlighted the stuff that's actually tropes that you can find on this Wikia thing. But so transmigration originally occurs in Chinese and Korean web novels, where it's kind of interchangeable with reincarnate into another world, where our original character is reincarnated, and then usually in a completely separate world from their original world, or in some cases it's like a Freaky Friday flip, but we didn't really read any of those. Typically the character will either refer to themselves as a transmigrator, or they'll be referred to as a transmigrator in the text, which I have seen happen. Technically, this is contrasted with Trapped in Another World, which the original character retains their body and the possibility to return home and doesn't involve death. Japanese fans will use the term isekai to cover both of these, which is where there's some confirmation and kind of mixing up of the two. Technically, this exists as a subtrope of body snatcher, as you are taking over the body and life of a pre-existing character from show within a show as a larger trope. And if it is a major named character that the person takes over, you essentially become next life as a fictional character, subtrope, which is interesting then because it gets into the first night with the Duke. Technically, she's not taking over a main character, right? But she does become the main character, in her story. A subtrope of this next life as a fictional character is the reborn as a villainess story, where transmigrators are specifically put into the bodies of villainesses.
Nerd.
I honestly could have given you this entire talk without needing the help from TV tropes. This is my bread and butter, and it's your fault.
Isekai. Isekai is isekai.
Nope. Isekai is not the same as transmigration, although Japanese fans might be so unsophisticated as to call them the same thing. So, here's our spreadsheet. These are all the things we've read. What type of thing they are, the version that we read, because some of these have light novels, but I haven't included that.
Hang on, I need to read this main character thing. I don't remember most of their names.
So we've got how far we read for each of these, which includes some videos that have not released yet on the channel. Whether these series are ongoing or complete, the original release date of the form of media that we read it in, and then our main character names. So as you can see, we don't have all like one type or another. We have a few mangas, a couple of webtoons, one web novel, one light novel, technically in our spread. We've read the furthest in Remarried Empress, Villains Are Destined to Die, and Abandoned Empress, although we did read 3 volumes in The First Night with the Duke, even though we didn't like that series. Of all the series we're currently reading, One is complete, so Abandoned Empress is completed. We found that out the other day. We're actually coming up on the last volume or two, so we will actually finish that relatively soon. And then the Accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter light novel is completed, but the manga is still adapting the light novel, so technically it's not. Father, I Don't Want This Marriage is technically complete, as is Who Made Me a Princess and My First Night with the Duke. We do plan to continue a few of these. So if you look at the release dates, I think that's actually a little bit more interesting because you can see which ones were kind of the earliest to come out in the particular form of media. And we talked about this when talking about isekais on the channel, is that are the tropes tired, or did you just accidentally watch one of the earliest examples of the trope after 50 more of the later examples, right? So, for the most part, with the exception, this is the order that we originally read these in. So, Accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter is really old. Started releasing in 2015, both the manga and the web novel. So that is basically the oldest thing on our list here. But as you can see, we then went on to read a couple of things that were created a little bit later, like 2019, 2020, instead of some of these 2017 ones. And it was because of when they got their release into English. So, like, we didn't get an English version of Abandoned Empress until after Remarried Empress and Villains Are Destined to Die started coming out. But Abandoned Empress is coming out faster because the entire series is already completed, so they're just releasing book after book after book. Same thing with Who Made Me a Princess. They're just releasing book after book after book after book. That's why I already have up to volume 5, even though we only read volume 1 to begin with. Alright, so does it make sense? So I think in that case, it's interesting then to look at, like, Abandoned Empress and Who Made Me a Princess in particular, because those are kind of two of the oldest ones that we read. And they're completed, but we didn't read a whole lot of them, right? We actually read more of the things that were started in kind of 2019, 2020, or so on. So do you have kind of any thoughts so far on sort of creation date as to time? Most of the ones here that are listed as manhwa or web novel. So all of the manhwas, I think, have web novels behind them, right? Or light novels. The 2 webtoons on this list, I did not check to see if they had an original novel or if they are just wholly separate and based on their own thing. Because there is every chance that the webtoons are just created that way. Whereas the manhwas are pretty much exclusively based on web novels or light novels already. Hence, you see the Accomplishments of the Duke's Daughter manga and light novel. Hamaifura also has a light novel or series.
Yep.
Yeah. And obviously this is kind of your reminder of all of the main characters' names.
Part of me wishes this was like Excel, where I can like quickly add filters and like sort release date from earliest to latest.
Yeah, I considered that, but I actually just ordered this in the order of when we read them. Because I thought that would be a little bit interesting to look at. The only thing technically out of order is Accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter, because we read the light novel a little further down, but I didn't think it really mattered because you already introduced to the story. There is one interesting thing in this list. So, Father, I Don't Want This Marriage, also known as Daddy, I Don't Want to Get Married. Technically, I have yet to figure out whether her name is Jubelian or Juvelian. Because online official sources give it both ways, and it seems to be a translation thing. So, some things listed as Juvelian and some things listed as Jubelian. I went with Jubelian because that was what was listed in the web novel description for the web novel that we bought.
This feels like an Artoria Altria situation.
Yeah, and to be fair, that happens a lot in these. Like, obviously, you've only read, like, these 11, but we'll get into how many I've read later, and oftentimes you'll get, like, a character whose name has, like, a letter that often gets confused when being translated from an East Asian language, and the translations will literally flip between it, or different translation groups will translate it different ways.
Did someone say Zolo does swords?
Yes! Lola Noah Zolo. Exactly that. I will say, the only one I maybe didn't check into as deeply as I could not find the last name for Princess Octavia. As you can see, I've got like all the official names for all the other characters. I'm sure Octavia has one, it just didn't come up online, and I didn't find my copy till after I'd already created this spreadsheet, so it's just gonna be Princess Octavia. Because that's that one BL one that was weird. Yeah. Alright, so I got some brief info here. I'm not gonna read these kind of verbatim, but we're just gonna, so Accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter, this one is Transmigration into a novel. She actually Otome game. This is an Otome game. So she awakens as the villainess, but she awakens at the moment of the kind of defamation declaration, right? So you know how in Hamefura she's counting down to, like the declaration of you must now die or whatever. Iris reincarnates in that moment as she is defamed.
When you're reincarnating, you immediately have to start playing Ace Attorney.
Yes. So obviously Hamefura. This is our other Otome game one. Technically there's one other, but these are the two big Otome game ones that we were started. Ironic, the accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter is older, actually, by 2 years.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive.
I wonder if there was some inspiration there at all.
I would also wonder, because Accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter is one of the other Japanese ones on this list. The majority of the ones that we're reading are Korean, but these two are Japanese, right? And they do bear like a striking similarity, because it's that exact same trope of like the declaration of, you know, kind of like, you are evil and I will not marry you, I will marry the heroine. It's the exact same trope.
I know this trope's popularity in anime was springboarded by the villainess anime.
Yep.
But like I know manga and manhwa especially, this has been a thing for a long time.
Yup. Yeah. So, obviously we know My Next Life is a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, also known as Hamefura. We've reviewed the anime on the channel. We can delve into that a little if we want to. I have actually chosen an image from like anime-esque art, but technically this is a review of the manga that we read.
It's hard to talk about for me too.
It does, because you forget like what's included in volume 1 or that sort of thing. So I'm not really going to penalize you if you.
And I know I had specific like things I appreciated about the manga over the anime, but I can't remember what those are anymore.
Exactly. All right, so then we've got Remarried Empress, which is a bit of an outcast. We'll get into why it's an outcast. So Navier Elitrovi is neither a reincarnator, nor a transmigrator, nor a rebirther. But it was a great start. We love Remarried Empress. We actually do really enjoy this one.
This one doesn't even involve a rebirth or a
No!
This shouldn't be on this list at all. What are you doing here?
It's included as a control point. Because it's the exact same type of sort of setting and novel without the transmigration trope. So I've included it as like a control point, right? Because a lot of the things she's doing are the things that are happening in these other stories. There is a villainess, there is a heroine, there is like a multiple, like a lot of the same stuff is happening, but this is an example of it happening without that transmigration.
I don't even think she went back in time.
She did not.
Nope, that was just a flash forward.
Yep. That's why I've included it as a control point. All the same things are happening in Remarried Empress, just without the reincarnation, rebirth, transmigration, which makes it even more interesting that it's so good and we've enjoyed it so much.
That's going to make the tier list awkward.
So, Villains Are Destined to Die. We love this one. This is another Otome game one. However, it's pretty interesting, I think.
I think it's the only one that takes the fact that it's an Otome game
Yep.
and actually runs with that idea for both its protagonist and story.
Yep, actual game mechanics. It is not the only one that I've read that maintains game mechanics, but it's the only one that you and I have both read that maintains game mechanics.
I think it's even interesting over other things that maintain game mechanics, because most anime I've seen that maintain game mechanics tend to maintain more RPG mechanics. You don't tend to see them play around with it as much in this way. Normally it's like the solo leveling or the gamer style, where it's like, oh, I'm leveling these stats, not the, oh, I'm gaining these affection points and tracking it that way.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty interesting. But obviously we remember Villains Are Destined to Die. It's one of the ones that we're currently up to volume 6 on. Both it and Remarried Empress are currently ongoing, so we've read up to the current amount of books released in English. I am caught up to the current chapters released in English of both, which is significantly further than NikNak is. So I'm actually keeping up with these. Remarried Empress is on Webtoon, if anyone's interested. It is all free up until like the last like 6-7 chapters, which are on that like fast pass release. But the season has just ended, so they will soon be made available for free, and you will be able to catch up to the end of season 3 if you are interested in it, which is where I currently am. Villains Are Destined to Die is releasing on a different website, and so I go to Tortuga for it because I am not paying those prices for that book if I am also buying it in paper. So, Abandoned Empress, one of our older ones that's completed that we've read a significant distance in. We've actually read up to volume 7 in this one just recently. You guys haven't seen that review on the channel, but it will be going up at some point. So we have read up to volume 7, and what we discovered in that review was that there are only like 40 40 webtoon chapters left, so there might only be another volume or two. This might only be an 8 or 9 volume series, and volume 8 is coming out relatively soon.
Short
so
and sweet.
We may actually be just about done with this series. Abandoned Empress is interesting because the main character, and we're going to talk about this in a second, the main character is reborn, but there is also a transmigrator. So the main character is reborn, so she's not a transmigrator, she's reborn, but there's also an isekai character in this. And that's what makes it interesting. Father, I Don't Want This Marriage is a little bit of a weird one. I mean, so she's reborn, not transmigrated. She just goes back in time to before her death, which is the case of a few things. But this one is odd because the 2 volumes of it I own seem to be self-published and not very well edited. What I did find was, I was searching this up the other day in preparation for finishing this PowerPoint. This is getting an official release.
So basically,
with an actual. So basically, what we ended up with is like an author's self-published early release. There is an official one coming out. This is actually the cover from the official one that's coming out.
So they found an actual publisher that'll.
Yes, yeah. So we actually will return to this. Because one of the reasons why I didn't continue you with this is because there were only 2 volumes published into English, and the quality of the volumes was interesting, to say the least. It was not great. And see, here, in the new one, they call it Juvelian, but in the old one, they call it Jubelian. So, whichever it is. We have Who Made Me a Princess. This one starts with the main character as a child. So it is interesting that it's one of the ones that we're reading where the main character isn't just dropped into the middle of like a harem situation, although it doesn't, we're seeing her, it's her father that's antagonistic the most towards her, so it's slightly less of a romance, but this is another one where she's just reborn backwards. Not So Wicked Stepmother is a novel rebirth, so she is a transmigrator. I hope you appreciate I chose that picture of her looking all creepy.
It's like, what did you ever want to be born in Kirkland Brand's Snow White?
Yes, actually. Like the Snow White story, because she's the evil stepmother in what's essentially a Snow White story. Which is fun. So her name's Abigail, and she's reborn into a book that she once read. A Stepmother's Marchin is reborn, not transmigrated, so she's just sent back to before she met her untimely end. A Stepmother's Marchin is pretty interesting to me because I've finished it, but as far as NikNak's read, there's actually no romance, per se. This is a family story. And you will be continuing this one. I have a list of things that we will be continuing that we haven't so far. This is one of them. It's also completed, officially, the manhwa, and I currently have 5 volumes of it. So the volumes are coming out fast. Princess of the Convenient Plot Devices is a BL novel reincarnation. It's Japanese. It's one of the only 3 Japanese ones on this list. It's a choice. Choices were made. Yeah. So she reincarnates as a woman into a world of BL, and the biggest problem that she seems to be complaining about is that she can't find a guy that she likes. Because men keep getting stolen away by other men from her affections. But also, some stuff seemed to be going on in the background. But we never continued this, and I don't know if we will, per se. Neither of us enjoyed it a ton, and I haven't bought any more since. So that's... who knows? And then our last one, My First Night with the Duke, is completed. It is the only one of the books that we read that the edition we read is technically R-rated. So it is explicit. And so I had forgotten that when I gave it to NikNak.
It wasn't hardcore explicit.
But
There's just a lot more, unlike the other ones, this one actually does have more more overt, I don't want to say subtleties, more overt, more overt events happen in this one.
But it is one of the ones where, they kind of get with the program relatively fast, which is interesting. So what I want you to keep in mind is, obviously, we have been continuing the series as The Remarried Empress, The Abandoned Empress, and Villains Are Destined to Die. But we will be continuing A Stepmother's Marching and Who Made Me a Princess, because they're both completed and I have the books and I enjoy them. And Father, I Don't Want This Marriage, because it's getting a release, and because Father, I Don't Want This Marriage is one of the earlier ones in this genre that I read that I really enjoyed, and it felt bad that I wasn't able to give you a translation or a version of it that really encapsulated the things I liked about it. So I'm excited that it is officially going to be coming out and I can give it to you. I also think that the version that's going to be coming out in English is the manhwa, not the web novel. So it is the art version of it, which I love the art for Father, I Don't Want This Marriage. So it's kind of like a dual benefit for me in continuing. But that's a basic overview of all the series we've read. Obviously, you could have read the description I put on screen for each of these. If I think about it when I upload the video, I will link this slides document in the comments, because I can do that. Not in the comments.
Only on Google Slides?
Yeah, it'll be view only Google Slides, but I'll put it not in the comments, but in the description of the video, so y'all can check this out. Because I know that our little video bubble's covering like a section of the stuff I'm showing you, but yeah. Okay, so here's some of the common tropes that are repeated across. So technically, except for the Remarried Empress, these are all villainess stories. So in all of them, the person is either the person who's being reborn is a villainess, or, you know, is made out to be a villainess, or the person is reincarnating into a villainess's body. So that is something in common for all of them, except for the Remarried Empress, which is the exception to a lot of things. So the ones that are based on otome or novels are Hamefura, Duke's Daughter, Villains Are Destined to Die, Not So Wicked Stepmother, Princess of the Convenient Plot Devices, and The First Night with the Duke. Those are all either otome games or novels, is what the character's reincarnating into. Reborn before the bad deeds happen: Stepmother's Marching, Father, I Don't Want This Marriage, The Abandoned Empress.
Is this like if the character was sent back, or like they just born before the events happen?
This is reborn back to before their evil events happen. So,
because wouldn't Hamefura fall under that too?
No, because she's also a transmigrator.
That's what I'm saying. Were you counting transmigrators there, or does it have to be the same person born back in their own timeline?
No, this is born back in their old timeline, which technically means I've missed one, and Who Made Me a Princess should be here. So disregard that. I'll fix it for the...
You'll add it in post.
I'll add it in post. So Crazy Male Suitor, Villains Are Destined to Die, First Night with the Duke, Father, I Don't Want This Marriage. Hamefura is there with kind of like a question mark, because I think there is one of the dudes is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. That's technically a root for her.
One of the dudes that was a root in the original Otome game was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Yeah, so
we didn't really read that part. And Giordo's supposed to be the art type cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but I don't think that really comes through with his character.
True, but because it's supposed to be there, I added it in. Villains Are Destined to Die, you definitely know who's cuckoo. Father, I Don't Want This Marriage, you definitely know who's cuckoo. And The First Night with the Duke, he's fucking insane. He's awful. We hate him. So, harems. The Abandoned Empress, Villains Are Destined to Die, question mark, and Hamefura. I say question mark on Villains Are Destined to Die because two of them are her brothers, and one is a slave. So I don't, yeah. And she's not actually trying to capture any of them, so much as just get them to not kill her.
Complete the game, escape the game.
Yeah, because I think she's under the sort of thought process that if she completes the game, she'll be able to, like, escape or something. So that's interesting. And then, this one's a little bit weird, but oblivious to the changes they've enacted upon the story, Hamefura and Father, I Don't Want This Marriage.
They stupid.
Yeah, they're, like, the main characters actively are kind of, like, refusing to acknowledge the fact that they're, like, and not maliciously either, but they enact change simply by being a different sort of character, but they're kind of refusing to acknowledge that things have changed, and so they still think that the other characters are out to get them, and they're still, like, afraid and scared, whereas Penelope knows that what she's doing is changing characters' opinions. And she's actively working with that, per se. Like, a lot of these characters, if it's they know that they're changing perceptions and stuff. Those two are just stupid. They're just stupid. I mean, there's no better way to say it. You know what I mean?
They be dumb.
So, you know, in regards to some of these common tropes, how are you? Like, do you have opinions on how some of these did these tropes, etc.? Like, I'd like to hear your thoughts here.
A few, yeah, I have some opinions here.
Okay.
So, I feel like on the Otome novel stuff, I feel like while that is a trope in a lot of them, it feels like most of them don't play around with it in the way that like it really could be. It doesn't feel like as explored as it should be.
Other than villains are destined to die.
It just often feels like an excuse to get them into a fantasy-esque setting with a high society politics.
Where they have pre-knowledge of the events.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's the pre-knowledge that they end up using. Like, this is an event that will doom me, or, I know that, like, this war is going to break out, so if I capitalize on these goods, I can make a bunch of money. Whereas Villains Are Destined to Die is the only one that's actively making use of Otome game principles.
Mm-hmm. I can say that oftentimes it feels like an almost, like, hilariously kind of like as a trope, it feels inferior to like the really common and really awful fan fiction self-insert trope. Because at least a well-written self-insert, it can almost feel like that person, like if it's written well, you can almost feel like they are playing their own like 5D chess game with this, and you can see the pieces moving. Here, because we're not really privy to the original stories, you don't really get that aspect.
I'd bring up that perhaps Accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter is somewhat exempt from that because what's happening is largely happening after the main story. Yeah. And she is kind of off on her own trying to create and do things to some extent. I mean, she's not...
And to be clear, I like quite a few of these, but I think just as a trope, it's not a very well explored trope across most of them. Some of them do play around, like Villains Are Destined to Die is wonderful about it. Reborn Before Bad Deeds, I don't have much of an opinion on that. That's a trope you see. I feel like I've seen that trope outside of manga, manhwa, light novels before.
I mean, it's Hamefura technically,
yeah.
but the girl from Hamefura is a transmigrator, so I don't put her there. Because, like, sure, but if you're a transmigrator, yes, you're usually born before the bad deeds, or in the middle of them when you have a chance to change your fate.
I guess one thing to mention about even though I know transmigrator is not on here as a trope,
yeah, because...
One thing to note about the transmigrators, it almost feels like, I don't know if you have this in the slide somewhere, it almost feels like there's a split. I don't know if I see it, I couldn't like tell you which ones did which in this necessarily, but there's a split of how much is it the person from, say, our world is in the body of now someone from the other world versus someone from the other world now just has the knowledge, like, as if it's like of a past life. It's like almost like which one's the primary personality seems to shift depending on the author.
As far as I'm aware, by technicality, every single one of our transmigrators is a person from another world reborn into this character's body. And they are wholly in control of that character.
I feel like I remember at least one or two was. If I think maybe it's just because of the translation, but I feel like...
I think you might be confusing some of just the reborns with the transmigrations.
Maybe.
Because some of these are just reborn. Like, they're just born back to before things went bad for them. Right? Whereas... the transmigration ones, that is one character born into the body of another, and typically they're like, I'm on my own, like, how would this character act, you know? And there are actually I haven't had you read any because I don't have any in paper, and I'm kind of not really sure about the sites I use working with you, but there are actually novels that do contend with this, okay, there are two people in one body whose consciousness is... kind of in front and powering the decisions. Like, is it the transmigrator who knows what's going on? Is it the original character? Is the original character kind of sitting back? Are they going to reclaim their body? I'm actually currently reading one that's doing that. I mean,
it's not on here, but one thing that, like, one where that it's not necessarily a fight back and forth for control or anything like that, but the Ascendance of a Bookworm does kind of cover that aspect of it in some of its later chapters.
Yeah, so that does happen. I didn't have you read any that had that conflict explicit because, like I said, none of those have really been translated to English that I have copies of. But there are some that really deal with that heavily.
Oh, yeah. Ascendance of a Bookworm. That's one I think I've read the actual novel. We didn't do it for the channel. I don't know if you ever did.
Yeah, I've been reading it.
Yeah. So, like, just a fun thing to throw out there is I did read one on my own before this.
But that's not a villainous.
Yeah. Not villainous, but yeah.
Also, it's an Issei.
No, that's Transmigration.
Yeah, you're right. It's Transmigration.
Like, if we had done it for the channel, it would have been on this list.
Yep. Yeah.
We just didn't do it for the channel. But it's just fun to mention that I actually do have some experience in this genre outside of being held captive.
Okay. All right. Anything for the bottom three?
Crazy Male Suitor. I feel like I said this in the middle of one of our discussions that haven't gone up yet. I think I'll leave that for that discussion to come up.
Villains Are Destined to Die.
Yeah, wait till we put out like one of our Villains Are Destined to Die. That one's gonna have a fun commentary on that trope from me.
Yeah.
Harem, I hate it.
I also don't super like it.
I hate it when it's harem. I hate it when it's reverse. Harems drive me up a wall 99% of the time.
I do like what Villains Are Destined to Die is doing with it, but I feel like that goes into Crazy Male Suitor. So let's not talk about that.
I feel like you can also say it's crazy male protagonist, because the protagonist is kind of not treating any of these people like they're human most of the time.
True. They're just stupid.
I love and hate that trope. Like, we didn't read this far in Hamefura because we only read the one volume of the manga, but I kind of feel like that trope for Hamefura at least worked much better at the start when she's a kid than it does when she's an adult, when it just kind of starts getting repetitive.
Yeah, that's... I will say, so Father I Don't Want This Marriage has that same trope, but when she's reborn, she's only reborn back a certain amount. She's not as a child reborn, but like I said, we had a bad translation and we didn't really read that far into it, so that's something I definitely want to return to.
I seem to also remember there's a lot... Didn't Father I Don't Want This Marriage yeah, it's a reborn before bad deeds. This isn't like a Katarina where it's just like, I need to not have these events happen. No, there's trauma there. That's the actual person.
Yup. Yeah, trauma. Okay, so I've listed out some unique things so far out of what we've read. So obviously, Remarried Empress is not a transmigration or rebirth novel. It's a control. So Princess of the Convenient Plot Device is the only BL, technically. And as far as we know about the story, there's no predestined death for Princess Octavia. Like, we don't actually know what her job is because she wasn't really a main character.
Wasn't the story that, like, she's not...
she just has to get married to a man and produce an heir for her gay brother.
Yeah, she was just a random side character.
Yeah. Which technically, Ripley from The First Night with the Duke is also a side character. But still. So, Villains Are Destined to Die is the only one that actually maintains Otome game mechanics. We've talked about this so far. But she has, like, events that happen. She's accumulating, like, affection scores with the characters, and the fun part about Villains Are Destined to Die is she starts with negative affection scores because she's playing in hard mode, which her IRL body had never managed to finish. She always got stuck at a certain point, and so now she's playing through it IRL as Penelope, almost dying constantly, but she can like see the affection scores up to a certain point, and has access to like quest events and stuff. And, like, reputation increases.
So, for the First Night of the Duke and the R-rated thing, you say there's a 16-plus version as well?
Well, no. So, technically, the First Night with the Duke is rated R. There is sex later in the chapters. We just didn't get to a whole lot of, like, explicit stuff. Now, Father I Don't Want This Marriage is technically rated R as well, but in the same way, as you can see up there, I have 2 copies of the Ennead, right? And that's because this is really common in Korea, is the authors make a 16-plus version and a 19-plus version. The 16-plus version will contain, maybe kissing, that sort of thing. The 19-plus version will contain sex.
I wonder if the 16-plus version of First Night of the Duke might be a little bit less problematic.
It's not been released as a 16-19. My First Night as a Duke just came out as My First Night with a Duke.
Okay.
Father I Don't Want This Marriage has a 16 and a 19. The Ennead has a 16 and a 19. There's a few other series that have like 16 and 19, and the difference is just the explicit kind of content levels. So technically Father I Don't Want This Marriage is too, but we did not read a 19-plus version, so we therefore did not read an R-rated version. So Accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter is the only one where the character is reborn during the judgment phase, which is unique because we're looking at the already past the judgment phase of our villainess.
Oh shit, I'm in court. I plead guilty.
Yeah. And then the Abandoned Empress is both an isekai and a rebirth, where the main character is reborn, but the heroine of the story is technically isekai'd. And she is not the main character. So, got some thoughts?
Let me quickly look through these. The problem is, like, my thoughts, I'm sure they're going to come out more when we get to our tier lists.
Yeah.
Because I do have some rather complicated thoughts that might not go the way you think on all of them.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, no,
Okay. So, some of the unique things we've seen so far. Not all of them, obviously, but some of them. So, moving on, this is my tier list for what we've read so far. And keep in mind, I am grading all of these on how far I've read IRL. So, for some of these, I've read much further than you, right? Like, I've finished A Stepmother's March-In. I've finished Accomplishments of the Duke's Daughter. I'm currently up to date on Remarried Empress and Villains Are Destined to Die.
Damn, you are hard on Daddy I Don't Want to Marry.
You know what? It's the I think it's because that one I tried to think of sorry, let me phrase my thoughts. I have finished Daddy I Don't Want to Marry, the manhwa. I have never read the web novel outside of this one book. And this book was exceptionally badly translated and written, right? And I understand that that is perhaps not the fault of the book, but it made it an unpleasant reading experience. Whereas if we had the manhwa here, which we will in the future, I would have moved it up several tiers. So Abandoned Empress I think is good. Same with Who Made Me a Princess, but they're not my favorites. As you can see, Villainess and Accomplishments, the manga, went at the same place. And that's mostly because I think that the manga is just... so little is covered in each of the manga volumes that it's kind of hard to really sink my teeth into the story based on like a single volume of manga. Just not enough happens. I didn't really like Princess of the Convenient Plot Devices beyond like the haha of the whole BL world.
It's a funny skit. It doesn't feel like the story has that much meat to it.
And I truly felt in this case, Not So Wicked Stepmom is here on the basis of the fact that we only read the first book, because I've actually read beyond that, and it gets better. It gets better after book one, but book one is not the most interesting, not the most unique. There's some funny things about it, but it's not particularly engaging. It's a good thing I read it online first and read further. My first night with the Duke, when I first read it, would have been much higher. But after our discussion, and, you know, the rightful pointing out of the fact that this is a manipulative and abusive relationship in many ways, just kind of straight down my tears. On a matter of principles, it is really an unhealthy relationship, and it's not really fair what's happening to the character, and I didn't really take that into account when I was first reading it. And I do feel a little bad for that, so it's down at the bottom now. So that's kind of my rationale for all of these. I'm sure you would have guessed like some of the top four, because I do really like those. I mean, we've continued two of them, and we will be continuing a third. So
I think your top ones are more like the top, like your S tiers. They're more or less within the same tier too that I'm in. So
yeah,
well, I'm sure we'll see that in a minute.
All right. So this is my thoughts. Are there any that really surprised you?
Daddy I Don't Want to Marry surprises me, but then if you're saying for the translation, that kind of makes some sense, though. Yeah.
Okay. I haven't seen NikNak since I had him do it.
I made this like 15 minutes ago.
Yeah, I had it set up for him, but I hadn't placed him yet. So I'm interested in this.
So I think the bottom's going to surprise you most, or what's not at the bottom.
Yeah, a little bit. That first night with the Duke does surprise me, because you did not like that in our discussion on it.
I went in hard on that one because it's a story that wants to be taken seriously. But remember, I have a taste for like really bad problematic plot devices being run in their natural course. This is the guy that watches like domestic Nakanajo for fun. Well, that plot device is extremely problematic, and like the analytical part of my brain is like, light this thing on fire. The other part of me is like
garbage fire.
I also think generally speaking the series is well written. It's just problematic.
Okay. I'm going to be honest, I expected those top three. Because you actually expressed more liking for Abandoned Empress than I did, because I didn't like it as much when we first read it, but I was buying it because I knew it was finished, and I thought you would enjoy it.
I just think I like the main character the most out of all of our, like, those top three right there, out of all three of their main characters, she's probably my favorite one, because she's the one that has the most, like, direct drive, it almost feels like. The one that makes the most active changes, whereas villains are destined to die.
But she also has more autonomy than Penelope.
Oh yeah, but I mean that just makes it a more interesting story at times for me.
Yeah, she's not confined to having to get all these people to like her necessarily. She's able to take action on her own. Remarried Empress I expected to be up there. We've been largely enjoying that series.
Yeah.
I did see an interesting comment from someone the other day when I was reading the finale. And somebody in the comments on the finale episode was like, I don't understand why people are hating on Rashta. When in reality, all Rashta's doing is trying to protect herself. And we're absolutely shitting on her for it. And I don't want to get into that now, but I did see that comment and I thought it was interesting.
I mean, I can see where that person's coming from, though. I do like that's part of what I like about the series is Rashta, despite being a trash-ass character, what she's doing makes sense and is understandable. She's just
Stupid.
not. Yeah, she's dumb.
She's not even stupid. She's just unused to the political machinations of noble society and the way that noble society works.
Like, technically, if I can step in there and give my 2 cents here, I think the main character is kind of at fault for some of this, because the main character very well could have knowing her own situation, could have taken Rashta a little bit more, knowing that this is a major political occurrence here. In a lot, like,
but it's not a major political thing for kings to take mistresses. It's not her job to.
Shouldn't be. There's obviously a lot of tension already existing there, and
but she doesn't know the cause for the tension between her and the emperor, because he didn't tell her.
But like she fully knows that, like, creating beef or creating tension with Rashta is only going to make things politically worse.
Yeah,
and she's still, like, on her part, she's still flaming that or not trying to make any kind of peace, which I understand why she's doing it as a character. But I also think that this is just the politics playing out here.
Yeah, I don't think she's actively afraid.
No, I don't think she's the worst person for it.
It's more that she's just choosing not to give inexplicit support for Rashta. It's more like she's just choosing not to let it just sit, I guess. Anyways.
I mean, their first interaction was largely, on Rashta's part, largely innocent, and she did. Yeah. It was the Empress that was, like, escalated that. Yeah. And that did set the tone for most of their later interactions.
Yeah. I'm actually, I want to know why you put A Stepmother's March so high, and here's my reasoning for that. We've only read the first volume of that. I love the series, obviously, and you knew you were going to be continuing it. Mm-hmm. I didn't think you were as interested in that one as some of the others, but maybe I'm
so maybe it's because that's around the point where I started really leaning into the joke of Jesus Christ, free me. But no, I like the family dynamic a lot in that one. Yeah, and that one that makes it stand out in my mind a lot more than some of the lower tier ones for me.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I think. Yeah, that's interesting.
That said, if I was told I was allowed to rank these based off of where we're currently at in the series ourselves, Hame Furo would have fallen much, much lower.
So I see accomplishments of the Duke's Daughter is real close to one another. I presume that's just because the method of transmission, you get more information in the light novel than you do in the manga, so the manga's a little bit more boring.
But if you read far enough in the manga, it's the same story, so I didn't want to drop it low. I almost put it in the same tier anyways, but, part of the reason the tier list's like that and why, because I'll say right now, First Night in the Duke almost ended up C tier. Mm-hmm. The reason why it didn't was because I wanted to have that even, like, 3, 2, 3, 2, and then I can have it, like, split evenly so it looked a little bit nicer.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
A little like, no, I don't want to say petty, a little dumb, but yes, a couple things were replaced because of aesthetically.
Yeah. Villainess, I'm not surprised by. It's solid, but it's not the best.
I think it overstays its welcome after a fair little while.
Especially the stupid trope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You barely remembered Who Made Me a Princess, so I'm not surprised that's lower. But I'm interested in you reading further in it, because we are going to finish that. Daddy, I Don't Want to Marry. I mean, I said, I have issues with it based solely on, like, the translation of that particular volume, but I do like the story overall.
I mean, it was fine. So I feel like part of why it's low is just because it's been so long. Yeah. But also, like, I didn't think it was that bad. I thought the politics wasn't as interesting as, say, something like Remarried Empress or even Abandoned Empress. Yeah. Or Accomplishments of the Duke's Daughter. Like, those are really good politics, or the family politics of Marchand. Those are, like, really good politics. I don't think the politics are anywhere near as good as those. No. But I still appreciated that element of it.
That's fair. Princess of the Convenient Plot Devices, I understand why you put it there. I get it. It just wasn't amazing. Yeah. It was just kind of boring. And I expected Not So Wicked Stepmom. You did not super like that when we first read it.
I just thought the characters were kind of boring.
And they kind of are. To an extent. I really do think they kind of are. I'm going to be honest. The only reason why I was a little bit more positive about it is because I've recently read books 2 and 3, which I have. And I think it does get better, but it just really starts out generic, per se. I think it just does. And it's not, like, technically all of these are sort of generic for me at this point. But there are some that are more, kind of more unimpactful than others, per se. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of them. So I thought for the end, kind of the ending here. So here are some other books that are currently available in paper or ebook that will be coming out. So
The Villainous Turns of Hourglass, isn't that an ongoing anime?
is it? I would maybe check
That one seems familiar to me.
But I will say, well, I know Seventh Time. Anyways, so check The Villainess Turns the Hourglass. But The Villainess Turns the Hourglass, I currently have the first 3 volumes of. You will be reading.
No, it's not.
Okay. So, but you will be reading this. I have the first 3 volumes. I think it's interesting. Beware the Villainous, I cannot wait for you to read. I have the pre-order out on the first volume.
We're reading more of these?
Yes. But not... Here's the thing. Beware the Villainous is... You know how we talk about how, the dead horse trope turns into the beating a dead horse for fun trope? Beware the Villainous is beating the dead horse for fun trope. It is taking this to, it is taking the, villainess... accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter. It's taking the accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter start and then going full what the fuck.
Okay, you say beating the dead horse and that cycle, but I swear to God, the Isekai reincarnation.
Yeah.
I forget. I even though I usually remember, I forget the actual transmigration. That general group of stories have been through that cycle 5 times over. I swear to fucking God, it's like Heracles. It keeps coming back stronger and stronger.
You're gonna love Beware the Villainous. You're gonna love it. I'm having you read. May I ask for one final thing? But that's gonna be it's ebook only. So I need to.
If you need me to buy an ebook or 2, I can buy an ebook or 2.
Well, I'll take a look at it because I was planning on buying them, and then I think what I can do is I can lend you my Kindle for a week or 2, and you can read through them that way. It's a manga, not a manhwa, not a novel. It's a manga.
I don't mind buying ebooks especially if it's ebook exclusive.
Yeah, but I think it's $7.99 a book.
That's not a problem for me.
Okay, well, maybe we'll figure it out.
Once in a while, that's not a problem.
We are reading that, so we'll figure it out. I'm not gonna have you read. I swear I won't bother you again. Why Raeliana ended up at the Duke's Engine, we will be reading, but I don't know if we're gonna be reading it soon. It's another one that... So, after I first watched Hamefuro with you, right, and I got into this, the first 2 things I read after Hamefuro were Why Raeliana Ended Up at the Duke's Mansion and The Duchess's 50 Tea Recipes. Now, The Duchess's 50 Tea Recipes has not been released into English as a book officially, but Raeliana has. It's actually been coming out for a while. There are 6 or 7 volumes out so far. I just haven't bought them yet. And that is something that I do want to buy and read myself before I give it back to you, right? So beyond that, I don't really have plans on making you read any of the rest of these or buying them myself. Beyond reading them online to see if I enjoy them. But these are ones that are currently going to be available in English or are currently available in English.
I feel like since we mentioned it, we should do a sentence of a bookworm one of these days.
We should. We could. Yeah. That's probably something that we'll do. So these are just some. Now, what I thought we'd end with was a little what the fuck for NikNak. So, this type of book that I've read online. So, about a year ago, I started keeping track in a notes pad all of the books that I was reading from this genre because I knew we were going to be doing this, and I didn't know how many things. Hang on. And I didn't know how many things I'd be having you read because I had toyed originally with the idea of having you read a bunch more from this larger list. But, so this is some of the stuff that I have read online, either to the current chapter that was available when I read it, or to completion, depending. So as you can see, Beware the Villainess is here, right? The Broken Ring is another one that has a 19+ version. The Tyrants...
No, keep going. Just when you're done, I just had a thought, but keep going, sorry.
The Tyrant's Only Perfumer is one that I really enjoy. Same thing with The Monstrous Duke and The Contract Daughter. I really enjoy both of those. Ashtart, I'm kind of struggling with because it's hard to find a good translation of it, but I think it's a really good one. I Wasn't the Cinderella, I also love. Did you?
So can you go back to the definition of transmigration? I need to see that for a minute. Okay, so are we particular about the after death part of that?
So technically,
because some of these are not confirmed dead.
Well, oh, because you've heard of a few of these?
No, I mean, some of the ones we've read have not been confirmed dead, especially like Villains Are Destined to Die is not confirmed dead.
Yeah, no, not technically. So, that definition of transmigration is just for the word transmigration, not the trope itself. There is a clause on TV tropes, right, when defining transmigrators. Typically, it's because they're assumed dead, but some are not assumed dead yet.
So, we've read one that for the channel that's not on here, where someone was born into another or was put into another person's body.
We've read too many things.
Murder at the Kogetsu Con.
Oh.
Just, that was a random, like, wait a fucking minute. There's a Fate Transmigration story.
Yeah, technically.
Jesus!
So there's Duchess's 50T recipes. It's a little further down because I was having to write down ones that I sort of remembered later. So Duchess's 50T recipes, I adore it. One of the things I like about Duchess's 50T recipes is the author is super big into tea. And so like every chapter ends with like a description of a particular type of like actual tea and like how to prepare it, what things go best with it, or there's something like that in every chapter. And I just thought that was so engaging to like be reading a story where you're actually getting some sort of practical knowledge out of it.
I love when my cookbook comes with a free novel.
Exactly. Also, see, the reason why Raeliana ended up with the Duke is over here. As you can see, there's also some stuff like I became the villain's mother. That's a trope. That's a trope all in itself, reborn as the villain's mother.
MILF transmigration.
It is. I think Villainess Wants to Marry a Commoner might have been on here twice. Maybe? No, it's not. It's a different one. Empress of Another World is also out in paper. And I think there's like 8 or 9, not 8 or 9, but like 5 or 6 volumes out. It's very similar, though, to Who Made Me a Princess at the beginning. And I chose Who Made Me a Princess over... oh, no, that's the wrong... Fuck. No, Daughter of the Emperor. I chose Who Made Me a Princess over Daughter of the Emperor. Even though I could have gone either way on them. I'm not a villainess just because I can control darkness doesn't mean I'm a bad person is an interesting one. That one actually came under a bunch, I think, if I'm talking about the right one, it came under a bunch of controversy.
Oh, I think you've told me about this one.
Yeah, because she's the only character in the entire world that has dark skin, and she controls the powers of darkness.
Didn't they have to re-release it and change it?
With her with white skin, yeah.
Because it's a little bit yikes.
It really is, yeah. So it's interesting.
Not that I'm somewhere to speak. There's a lot of times where Fate's idea of making it the evil alter version is to just darken their skin. And that's also a little bit...
Yeah. There's another page. So here's some more.
No, my new glasses.
Oh, no. So some of these are some of the more recent stuff I've read. So like this is stuff that I've read like literally in the last like couple of weeks. I think everything I've read from Talented Baby Squirrel down is like the last literally this month for me.
Baby squirrel.
Baby squirrel. So as you can see under the oak trees there, and that's got a thing. The Bow and the Beast is completed and it's out fully. Duchess Crow is available on Manta. I don't know if it's completed or not. Some of these are really fucking interesting. My husband, my sister, and I is a revenge story. And it is oof. Like God, I would not make NikNak read that. That would just be cruel. So as you can see, there's even more stuff here. And I was like, I made a little note. There's probably about 100 more that I've read before I started keeping track that I just couldn't remember all the names for or wasn't able to easily find. Because you introduced me to this genre back in 2020 with Hamefora about a month before we saw it for the channel, and I've just been reading that ever since. Like, non-stop. As you can see, non-stop.
I made a mistake.
My hyperfixated. So, now, if you notice very carefully, I did not put ratings on these because I did not have it in me to go back and try to remember all of it. Because here's the thing, right? If you showed me the covers of these, I'd be able to remember which one is which. But just by name, I can only remember a few of these. Like, because even the names are all very similar. Do you know what I mean?
Ashtar is a servant in Fate.
Yeah, yeah. But do you mean...
Yeah.
You see what I mean. So there's a certain... Some of these I just can't remember what the name is. You know, like I just don't... The name does not tell me what the book is about. So I would have to go look it up, and then I would remember it, and I would remember what the story is like. But it's just one of those things that happens. I know, my list is pathetic. It's sad.
Pathetic.
Yeah. But I did read all of these, so I mean, you know.
Reading is good.
Mm-hmm. So, Transmigration.
I'm not getting out of it that easy. I know.
Well, you've got a few more that we'll get. I'm not gonna be like winding you up with another 11 or so.
Season 2.
Like I said, there's maybe like 4 more I want you to read so far. If I can find a good website for you to read the Duchess's 50 tea recipes on, I would like you to read that because it is completed. It only has like 150 chapters total, and those are webtoon chapters, so they're way shorter. And it hasn't gotten an English release, which I think is a goddamn fucking tragedy. The Duchess's 50 tea recipes is worthy of a book series. You should release them into English in books. But that's maybe the only one that I would go out of my way to try to get you to read, even though I didn't have like a physical copy or even like a released copy of them.
I'll say this. I'd be far more preferential to a season 2 of Transmigration than I am currently towards the manga superheroes marathon you were originally planning. Because, you know, after that last one, I don't have that much confidence in the genre.
Yeah, but once again, I don't have as many of those,
Sure.
you know? So, like, so this is obviously kind of a big summation video of something we did over the course of a year. I would like to do another roundup of these after maybe another year we finished some of these series as we read further, but I'm not intending to inundate you with a bunch of series like I did last year, where we had like 4 in 1 month.
I'll be honest, your off the shelf was just Transmigration.
Yeah, so I'm trying to kind of mix them in with other stuff. That's why I have you reading Power Fantasy Leveling. We're reading Bakuman because we liked it. We're reading Fate stuff. We're reading Pokemon and Fruits Basket. And then the superhero stuff is kind of mixed in gradually. Because so far I've only had you read like the one superhero thing. It was just, and it'll be coming out relatively soon on the channel. So, because my goal is I'd like to do something similar for Power Leveling Fantasy. Because I do think that's another one where there's like 1,000 in the genre and there's a lot of different things happening in them. And I'd love to do a video like that for this as well. So we will be doing that. And then ideally I want to make kind of a video for like the DC and Marvel, like the stuff that's getting released as webtoons and mangas. Because I think it's interesting that this stuff is getting released as webtoons and mangas.
Let's be honest here, you want an excuse to read Wayne Family Adventures again.
I want an excuse to make you read Wayne Family Adventures. Which is fantastic. I love it. Can you blame me?
No, I've heard good things about it, even from besides you.
It's a really good series. Yeah. So, thank you all for watching our big summation video. I think maybe this helps kind of put your thoughts in order on some of these. Maybe think about kind of the genre overall and the tropes that we do keep seeing over and over again. Obviously, there's tropes I didn't include on the list when I talked about tropes in here that are, like, big. Like, there's some things that are, like a woman, like, starting her own business or, like, profiteering off of her knowledge of the future. That's a big one, you know? That happens in a bunch of the books that we're reading.
That's just a general isekai trope, too.
I know, and that's what I mean. That's why I didn't include it, because I was like, it's kind of generic and it happens in any sort of rebirth, reincarnation thing if you know what the story is. But yeah.
In conclusion, isekai is isekai.
In conclusion, transmigration is not isekai. Not all isekai is transmigration. But all transmigration is technically isekai? No. Isekai is not transmigration, and transmigration is not isekai, but some people don't make the distinction.
In conclusion, this is what happens when we try to turn Urban Dictionary terms into genres.
So, with that being said, like, comment, subscribe if you've read 1, 2, 3, 11, 12, 32 of anything
200?
you saw. Probably more. Of anything you saw in this lovely PowerPoint, which will be available in the description, please let me know if there are any that I did not list here that you think I might have read, or I should read, or you would recommend I read. Please put a list in the comments below, and I will go and look them all up individually and read them.
And let us know if we technically forgot any others.
Oh, God.